Good day to you, or buenos dias, I should say. I'd like to say hello to you from Mexico. And this is my family's place. It's called a condo, but I think of it more as a townhouse. We're going to walk inside here, past a typical palm tree down here for these parts, and some beautiful flowers there. And we're going to walk through the entrance here to the back where I'm going to do today's lecture. You can see some colors that are a lot different from what you'd see in the US. In kitchen, we only arrived yesterday. We're all a little bit sore from 2 plane flights and lots of sitting. So we're not quite moved in here yet. But this is the patio. And I'm going to swing around here. But before I do, I want to tell you that I'm not some rich guy who bought a place in Mexico just like that. No, my wife and I actually remortgaged our house 10 years ago when I took a sabbatical down here. I took a sabbatical to work on my book, Comparing Media from Around the World. That's a book that I use in a class that I teach called Comparative Media. And when I was down here, I decided right away that this was the place that we had been looking for a long time, to have a place in another country, because we're big world travelers. And we've always wanted to do that. So we did this in 2007, but we remortgaged our house. Now, why do I feel compelled to tell you that? It's in part because I'm very conscious of my presentation of myself to you on social media, on D2L, and in person when I get a chance to meet you in person. And that's what today's subject is all about. It's all about presentation of the self and how that's different in the video age. Because I don't want you to have the impression that I'm a rich person or that I was born into wealth. In fact, my wife and I started with a fixer-upper with no heating, no glass windows, and no shower in our first home. And we really had to start from scratch. So it's important to me that I don't come across in a certain way that it appears kind of privileged. And you have your own ways that it's important to you that you don't come across, and important ways more so that you do want to come across. And the potential for those kinds of ways of presenting yourself today in new ways and having control over that is greater than it's ever been. And that's because of social media. That's what we're going to be talking about, how our presentation of ourselves is different on social media. So one of the ways that ourselves is different is in the idea that we personally display to the public the connections that we have. That's right, think about it. Your friends, your followers, all the people who access you on social media, other people can see. So not only are you having a relationship with them in which you are known to all of them and you know all of them as well, but they know each other. So our connections to others are being displayed in ways that was never the case before. If you were living in a world before social media, you would be able to travel in circles, especially if you live in more urban areas, but even in rural areas where you could have relationships with certain people that others would not know about. It would be through your workplace friends. You only have those. It would be through your school friends. You only have those. It would be the people that you cross paths with when you go to a certain destination on a regular basis and you see people that you cross paths with. Those worlds would be separate from each other. Today, even though you have privacy settings, even though you can control to some extent the friends and the followers you have, and as far as what other people see, in general, that has been expanded exponentially by social media. We also know that the techniques that are available for us to manage ourselves and the way that we present ourselves to others through social media are astounding today. We've already talked about filters on photos in this class. Then, of course, there's the way of positioning yourself within the camera frame. I very carefully chose this particular frame. I've used it many times in my classes before. I want the palm trees behind me to be helping to shape the photograph, and I want to have a place that is roughly at eye level with me so that, I'm not talking to you up here and I'm not talking to you down here. We have these tools available as well as many others on social media. Just think of the times that you've posted something and then deleted it or edited it or decided only to share it with a few people, and how carefully you thought about the way that you were going to appear in the photo. You fluffing your hair or adjusting your shirt or taking multiple takes or putting makeup on. All these things that we do, and then the angle that we shoot ourselves as a photograph. All of these things go into just explaining a few of the tools that we have available today on social media to really control how we come across to other people. And so there is a certain sense of falsity that comes across today, isn't there? Don't we have to admit that there's a certain falsity or inauthenticity that comes across in our posting on social media today, that who you present yourself is not really who you are? I have friends just like you who I check out on Facebook. In my case, I know it's the old person's medium compared to many of you, but on your Twitter, your Snapchat, your Instagram, you have friends, do you not, who are consciously posting things about themselves, and their lives just cannot be that happy. I mean, I had a great weekend, always smiling, so fortunate, so blessed. All these messages coming out all the time about how happy they are. They can't really be that happy, can they? Or similarly, you may have somebody who's constantly representing themselves as being out of sorts. They can't be that out of sorts. It's speaking to this idea that there's a certain falsity that comes across because of our ability to control our expression of ourselves on social media. I mean, should we really be able to control that? If you could possibly imagine yourself in the day of, say, The Scarlet Letter, that book that everybody had to read about the character who was in Puritan New England, and she had an affair with a preacher, and it was discovered by the community. It was made public by that community, and so she had to wear a scarlet letter. It's kind of a very ancient way of slut-shaming, if you will, the walk of shame kind of idea. She had to wear that. Think of her abilities to control her self-presentation in that environment. Not too much, right? That's part of why the shaming actually worked, is because she had to face the same people each and every day in a limited number of clothes, and there was that letter that was put on her clothing. Today, could it be any more different? You can hide any part of your body in the frame. You can do things to your face to take away wrinkles. You can make a comment that you decided was said in the heat of the moment and you want to retract it, or you want to add to it, or you want to soften it, or you want to make it sharper. Our presentation of ourselves allows for falsity today. Not necessarily intentionally, but from the point of view, is what you're seeing in total of yourself on social media, is it really who you are? And that brings up actually one of the interesting ideas of the book, an interesting idea to me. This book is based in sociology. The author is from a sociological background. She talks about two sociologists who had a lot to say about the presentation of self in everyday public. One of them is George Herbert Mead. George Herbert Mead, the presentation of self, George Herbert Mead was a researcher of the self, and then we have Erving Goffman, who is also a researcher of the self, but Erving Goffman wrote a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And so this book speaks to the presentation of self in everyday life in ways that are sociological, and it's our job to extend that over to communication. And so one of the things that this author says that I think is interesting, and come back to the idea now that I think also talks about communication, is the difference between I and me. Did you catch that in the book, the difference between the I and the me? And when does an I become a me? When you think of yourself, your I, right? You often start a sentence with that very letter. You start with you in the sentence, in other words. But when do you become me? Me, according to Goffman and people who have extended his work, me comes into play when you consider how you interact with others and what they say about you. That's when you become me. There's I, what you think of you, and then there's me, what others say about you when you interact with you. If I were to ask you right now, what's the best quality about your face? What would your answer be? What's the best quality about your face? I bet many of you would start that sentence with, well, people say my eyes. Okay, that right there is your me. That's you gaining a sense of yourself because of how you're interacting with others. And much of that happens on social media, right? And the kinds of things that people reinforce about you when they like stuff, when they retweet, when they respond to you, when they ignore you. All of this fits into you understanding what yourself is like in the context of others. And that's where we get an additional concept in this chapter, and it's called the generalized other. These are all these other people who exist out there. In our average everyday life without social media, those are the people that you walk past when you go shopping. They're people that you purchase things from when you go to the store. They're people that you encounter when you're taking a walk on campus. They're people that you encounter when you play sports. These are the generalized other. But when you add social media to the equation, now that generalized other becomes vast. You have people who you will never meet, who are part of that friendship, social network that you've established. And how many of those people, by the way, are lurkers? You know they're there, you haven't heard from them in a long time, but you get a sense that they are watching you. The word stalking is sometimes used to describe somebody who does that aggressively. They are part of the generalized other in a way that would not be part of a person's life before social media, to have this vast network of people who are able to monitor you through what you post on social media and you don't even know it. Excuse me. And so the generalized other, to break that down into concepts that this chapter breaks down into to make it helpful to understand the true nuances of this term, are number one is you have an imagined audience. This is an audience that when you post on social media you think is out there. You're not positive. You think it's comprised of your friends and family, that's for sure. You think it's comprised of people who admire you, but then there are other people, as we already discussed, who are in touch with you, they're connected to you, but you don't really know how they feel about you because they're lurking. They're part of that generalized other. This is all part of the imagined audience. You have to imagine it because you can't know it for sure. And then next is a different level of audience in your network of generalized others, and that's online ties. That means these are people that you do have connections with. They're your group members who you're emailing. They're your friends who are part of your group chat. They're your FaceTime people. They're the people who regularly follow your Instagram. They're the people who repost and post on your social media in general. These are your online ties. These are people you do have connections with. And then the last way of looking at generalized other is the intimate online ties. These are people that we have very close relationships, usually offline relationships as well. They're our family and our friends that we've met, we've hugged, we've felt them in the flesh, we've seen them in the person, but then we also connect with them online. You know, how many mothers are going to be texting their sons and daughters home from Christmas, dinner's ready, and you're only upstairs? That's part of these online others, and that's all you need to know about the relationship, because there's so much that's part of it offline as well. Another aspect of our environment with social media and how our self is presented that I want to make sure that I get across this morning is that we can constantly revise ourselves. You know, in the old days when a photograph even was around, you know, a Polaroid photograph, take a photograph and that photograph was such a permanent etching of a person. And yet it was so modern and it was so interesting that it was created in the moment. But today that photograph pales in comparison to what you can do. You can take a photograph on your phone and you can have 50 different ways that you can doctor that photograph within seconds before you decide to post it. You can change your skin tone. You can clip things out that you don't like are in the photograph. You can put filters on. You can put emojis. You can put banners across you. You can do so many things today. And then you can do the same things tomorrow. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. I spoke about my friend who changes his profile picture constantly and how within 1 hour he had a far away shot, and the next thing I knew, he was close up. And that speaks to the constant revision that we're able to do of ourselves online today in social media. Also, there is the idea that we have multiple selves that we present to people. We have our professional self that we keep on LinkedIn and on a separate Facebook account. And then we have a double Facebook account where we are a different person using a completely different name who people wouldn't even know. My email address for my Yahoo account is funsun99999. Now, people wouldn't know that's me until they discover it in some way, shape, or form. It's not intuitive. I chose it just because my name, Mackenzie, was not available, so I chose it while I was here in Mexico, in the sun, hopefully having fun. That's the way I came up with it. But it's a completely different self, and you have that too. And you need to in today's world when it comes to seeking professional job opportunities. I had a student. She posted on her Facebook something that said that she was blowing off work and she was going down the beach. Well, she went to apply for an internship about a year later, and the employer said to her flat out, "Why did you lie about going to the beach?" And she was like, "What can you say?" That's what it's like. Employers are mining Facebook for that personality, but they want to discover the real personality, so they're looking elsewhere. So it's a cat and mouse game. You know, we have so many different social media platforms, and we have so many different personalities that we portray increasingly on each different media platform. So it's really different selves that we are presenting today because of social media. And how interesting is that? Not that this didn't exist before. People were involved in acting, for example, where you present a different self. And certainly people act different when they go to work and they're presenting a different version of themselves. But you have so much more control of finer details of yourselves when you manage them on social media. Next, I'd like to return to a concept of affordance and how that relates now to the presentation of the self. Remember, affordance are the technological capabilities of the medium, in this case, the cell phone and the software. And there's a researcher named Boyd, and he talked about 4 kinds of affordance with social media in presentation of the self. Boyd said that, first of all, you've got persistence. And what that means is once it is there, it persists in time. You can post it on social media, even Snapchat, which supposedly is fleeting. You Snapchatters all know that you can recover images in lots of different ways. And there are ways to beat the system to get your image last longer than 6 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever it is. So social media created persistence as opposed to just running into somebody in public and making a comment and you go on your way and there's no record of it anymore. There is persistence of yourself on social media. That's why we have Throwback Thursdays, right? That self exists in the cloud of Facebook, and it's reminding you about it. And do you want to put? It's persisting. Then we have replicability. To replicate something is to make another copy of it very quickly, and that can also be done. You could copy this video very quickly. You can do a still shot of me. You could copy it. You could send it around. You can go back into any of the photos and copy them so easily. It's a right click of a mouse for non-Apple computers, and then a left click wherever you want to paste it. Suddenly, you can replicate images constantly. And that also speaks to the proliferation of ourselves. There's so many of us in the same form and so many platforms because of how they've been shared. Google yourself sometime and see if under Google Images different selves of you come up. Then we have scalability. Scalability is the next dimension of Boyd's 4 kinds of affordance. And that is, in social media, you can get your stuff out there to a lot of people really quickly, especially if it goes viral. Just look at all these people who are coming out with sexual harassment and how suddenly they are speaking to people in much bigger groups of people than they ever would have before because their social media has been taken a hold of and shared and reposted, and maybe mass media get a hold of them and do stories on them. So there's a scalability that's always there with digital media, whereas if no digital media, you've got to run around to people like in the puritanical days, in the scarlet letter days. You'd have to go around and meet people. And how long would it take you to even meet 100 people? Today that you can do that in a flash because of the scalability of social media. And then we have the searchability of social media. You can go back and look up people from your high school and find them fairly easily. What happened? You know, there's a name I hadn't thought about in years. I'm going to look at. I had a roommate in college, Mark Heffelfinger. Really, really distinctive name. He had a radio disc jockey named Fingers. His name popped in my head, Mark Heffelfinger. He became a state cop. I went searching for him. You can do this, and you can be found on social media. All right, now to round out our talk today, I want to finish with really asking the big question. Is it good for us to be able to present so many dimensions of ourselves on social media? Or does it put us in that mindset where we are more conscious than ever before, and not in a healthy way, where we're worried about, did we present the right self? Did we present our best self? Did we present a self that isn't going to irritate other people's or disappoint our parents? That's a lot of pressures in considering how to present yourself. It's a question I don't know that we can answer for sure, but it's definitely worth asking. Have a great day.